Imagine for a second the person sitting in the cubicle next to you.
Correct.
Or, the colleague you interact with on a daily video call.
Right, sure.
Only this specific coworker never sleeps.
Oh, wow. Sounds exhausting for them.
Right. But they never sleep, they never need to be trained, and they don't require any sort of onboarding for a new software tool.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And they don't get distracted by their phone. But here is the real kicker, right? They possess the exact same cognitive capability as the median human being in literally every single intellectual task you could possibly assign them.
Every single one.
Every single one. I mean, from drafting complex legal contracts to analyzing satellite imagery to writing a catchy marketing jingle.
Yeah, and that is a profound shift in how we actually categorize intelligence.
It really is.
Because you're describing this this universal capability baseline applied without any biological constraints.
Right.
And that specific threshold, a system that's functionally equivalent to an average human, deployed universally, that's the working definition of artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
AGI. And, I think the craziest part is that threshold is no longer just some, science fiction thought experiment.
Yeah, no, not at all.
The massive stack of research, articles, philosophical treatises, the theoretical papers we are unpacking today for this deep dive, they all point to the same reality.
They do.
We are right in the midst of an imminent transition from the specialized AI we have today to true AGI.
Yeah.
And to really understand what that actually means for you, for your job, and for the global economy, we have to start by looking at the architecture of the systems we interact with right now.
Which is crucial, yeah.
Because the AI we use today, what the literature calls artificial narrow intelligence, or ANI, is simultaneously just brilliantly capable and shockingly, hilariously limited.
It really is. And, the distinction between narrow and general intelligence, it's absolutely foundational to this whole discussion.
Right. Break that down for us.
So ANI refers to systems that are strictly confined to well-defined tasks.
Okay.
Think of the text-to-speech engine on a phone, right? Or the large language model generating a quick email for you.
Or like a chess engine, like Stockfish or something.
Exactly, like Stockfish. They operate entirely in silos. A system trained to master chess cannot transfer that strategic foresight to, say, balance an accounting spreadsheet.
Because it just doesn't know what a spreadsheet is.
Right. It lacks the underlying architecture to abstract its learning outside of its specific training environment.
So it's stuck in its lane.
Completely stuck. AGI, by contrast, is defined by its capacity to generalize knowledge.
Generalized.
It can face a completely novel problem, pull from disparate domains of knowledge, and actually formulate a solution without requiring, a massive team of human engineers to reprogram its parameters.
That's the leap.
That's the leap. And then, of course, beyond that sits artificial superintelligence, or ASI.
Which is the scary one.
Well, it's the one that outperforms the absolute peak of human ability across every conceivable metric.
Right. So if narrow AI is like a highly advanced calculator, AGI is the actual mathematician.
That's a great way to put it.
And superintelligence is just something entirely beyond our current comprehension.
Exactly.
But, staying grounded in the present for a minute, I was reading through the research on why our current calculators fail so spectacularly at basic tasks.
Oh, the failures are fascinating.
They really are. And the sources emphasize that these failures aren't just software bugs. They are intrinsic features of how neural networks actually process information.
Yeah.
We build these systems by training them on massive data sets to recognize statistical patterns. But pattern matching is not the same thing as causal reasoning.
No, and that is the absolute crux of the current technological bottleneck.
Right.
Modern neural networks process inputs through billions of mathematical weights and biases. They essentially map an input, like the pixels of an image, to an output, like the word cat.
Right. It sees the shape and says cat.
Well, sort of. And this is highly effective in stable environments with really clear patterns. But humans do not navigate the world purely through statistical correlation.
No, we don't.
We construct these dynamic mental models of physical reality. We understand cause and effect.
Like, we know things fall if you drop them.
Exactly. But a neural network merely understands that certain data points frequently appear together in its training set.
Okay, so the 2018 adversarial perturbation study in our sources, this perfectly illustrates this lack of a mental model.
I love this study.
It's wild. So researchers took a 3D printed plastic turtle.
Right.
To any person looking at it from any angle, it is undeniably a turtle.
Of course.
We know what a shell is. We know what a reptile shape is.
We have a concept of turtle.
Exactly. But the researchers applied incredibly subtle texture modifications to the surface of this object. Tiny mathematical adjustments to the pixel patterns on the turtle's shell that are essentially invisible to a human observer.
Basically looks like a normal turtle to us.
Just a normal turtle. But when they showed this physical object to a state-of-the-art computer vision system, the AI confidently classified it as a rifle.
A rifle.
A rifle.
Okay.
From every single viewing angle.
Yeah, and that specific failure reveals exactly how the architecture functions.
How does that even happen?
Well, the AI system does not actually possess a conceptual understanding of a turtle or a rifle.
It doesn't know what they do.
Right. It doesn't understand physical space, volume, or intent. It is simply evaluating mathematical gradients.
Okay.
The researchers isolated the specific pixel clusters that the neural network heavily weighted toward the classification of rifle, so perhaps the texture of a wooden stock or a metallic barrel.
Oh, I see.
And by overlaying that mathematical pattern onto the turtle, they totally hijacked the bottom-up processing of the system.
Because humans use top-down processing.
Exactly. Our brain says shape is turtle, so we just ignore the weird microtexture.
Yeah, you just see a bumpy turtle.
But the AI relies entirely on the microtexture because it has absolutely no concept of the overarching shape.
It's just doing math on pixels.
That's all it's doing.
And this exact same structural blindness applies to language, too.
Oh, heavily.
The research brings up the pronoun disambiguation problem, or the PDP.
Yes.
So if I say to you, the trophy doesn't fit in the suitcase because it's too big, you instantly know the trophy is the thing that is too big.
Right, because you intuitively simulate the physical scenario in your head.
I can picture it, yeah.
You've interacted with containers before, you understand the physics of three-dimensional space, and, the rule that a contained object must possess a smaller volume than its container.
Right, basic physics. But if I change just one word and say, the trophy doesn't fit in the suitcase because it's too small, your brain instantly flips the subject.
Now the suitcase is too small.
Exactly. But an AI system struggles profoundly with this sentence.
Because it lacks that spatial mental model.
It can't picture the suitcase.
No, the language model operates in this high-dimensional vector space where words are represented by numbers based on their proximity to other words in its training data. Okay. It knows the word trophy and the word suitcase frequently appear near words describing size.
Sure.
But it does not internally visualize a suitcase. It can't simulate the physical act of attempting to place a large object into a small container.
It's just predicting words.
Right. It's an engine of linguistic prediction, just guessing the next most likely token based on statistical frequency.
I found it so fascinating that even the absolute cutting-edge reasoning models mentioned in the text, like OpenAI's O3 or DeepSeek R1, they fall into these exact same traps.
You do, despite their advancements.
Because these are models scoring upwards of 90% on AMath benchmarks.
Which is serious competition-level mathematics.
Yeah. You would think a system doing complex calculus naturally understands logic.
You would think so.
But the sources point out that if you give them an elementary logic puzzle that falls slightly outside their training distribution, they just fail catastrophically.
Yeah, and the phenomenon occurring there is severe overfitting.
Overfitting.
Yes. The model has ingested millions of math problems and proofs. It has mapped the intricate statistical structures of how to solve an equation.
Right.
So when presented with the AM test, it is essentially reconstructing the nearest structural neighbor from its vast training set.
It's mimicking.
It mimics reasoning flawlessly, but present it with a totally novel logical constraint, something a human child figures out through basic trial and error, and the illusion breaks.
It just hallucinates.
Exactly. It hallucinates a solution based on memorized patterns rather than reasoning from fundamental first principles.
So it's essentially like a student who memorized the entire chemistry textbook perfectly to ace a multiple choice final.
Yes, great analogy.
But if you drop them in an actual laboratory, they blow the room up because they don't actually grasp the underlying chemical reaction.
They just know the vocabulary.
Exactly. They just know the words. And the sources emphasize that continuing to build these massive pattern matching students has a severe environmental cost.
Oh, The inefficiency of brute force pattern matching is staggering when compared to biological intelligence.
Huge, right.
The research notes that training a single large-scale AI model can emit upwards of 284 tons of carbon dioxide.
284 tons.
To contextualize that, it is roughly 5 times the lifetime emissions of an average car, including its manufacturing process.
That is insane.
And humans, conversely, we learn complex concepts from just one or two examples because we grasp the causal mechanisms.
We're highly efficient.
Exceptionally energy efficient. For the industry to actually achieve AGI, it cannot simply rely on building larger data centers to process more tokens.
You can't just throw more power at it.
No, the fundamental architecture must evolve toward genuine efficient comprehension.
Right. So if the current paradigm is essentially this energy-hungry parlor trick of statistical correlation, that raises the immediate question of measurement.
How do we test it? Yeah.
Exactly. How will the scientific community actually verify when a system crosses the threshold from narrow AI to AGI?
It's a huge debate right now.
Because for decades, the public imagination has relied on the Turing test.
Right, from 1950.
Alan Turing proposed the imitation game. Basically, if a human judge cannot tell they are communicating via text with a machine, the machine is deemed intelligent.
But the consensus across the contemporary research provided is that the Turing test is fundamentally broken as a metric for general intelligence.
Oh, broken. Why?
Because it measures human gullibility and conversational simulation, not cognitive capability.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, it actively incentivizes what researchers term artificial stupidity.
Artificial stupidity. That's such a counterintuitive concept.
It really is.
Because if you want to prove you are smart, you shouldn't act like a flawed human.
Right.
The text brings up Eugene Guzman.
Oh, classic example.
This was the chatbot that reportedly passed a Turing test event in 2014 by pretending to be a 13-year-old boy from Ukraine.
Exactly.
By adopting that specific persona, any logical errors, misunderstandings, or just bizarre non sequiturs were dismissed by the human judges.
They just blamed it on a language barrier.
Or the immaturity of a teenager. The system bypassed the requirement for intelligence by gaming human psychology.
And we see that escalation in modern systems today.
Oh, for sure.
The sources reference a 2025 study where advanced models like GPT 4.5 actually exceeded human baseline scores in humanness.
Wait, they were more human than humans.
Yes. In blind conversational trials, judges consistently rated the AI as more human than the actual humans participating.
That is wild.
When a system can perfectly simulate human empathy, hesitation, and conversational cadence, text-based interrogation just ceases to be a valid test of underlying reasoning.
Because it's just telling you what you want to hear.
Exactly.
So the research community is entirely moving the goalposts.
They have to.
They're shifting away from digital text boxes and proposing physical, embodied tests to verify true generalization.
Yes, embodied tests are the new frontier.
Like the IKEA test, the flat pack furniture test. I love this one.
It's a brilliant example.
The challenges for an AI to control a robotic body and autonomously assemble a piece of IKEA furniture using only the scattered parts and the visual instruction manual.
And the computational complexity of that task is just immense.
Because there's no code for it, right?
Right. It requires the integration of computer vision, fine motor kinematics, spatial reasoning, and sequential planning.
All at once.
There are no pre-programmed assembly paths. The agent must look at a two-dimensional diagram, infer the three-dimensional geometry of a wooden peg.
Locate the peg on the table?
Yes. Locate that peg in physical space, calculate the exact force required to insert it into a specific hole without breaking it, and adapt if a piece rolls off the table.
Because the real world is messy.
Exactly. MIT's 2013 ICABot demonstrated early multi-robot coordination to assemble a table in 10 minutes, which proved the foundational viability of mapping visual input to complex physical execution.
But assembling a table in a controlled lab is still somewhat structured, right?
It is.
So the coffee test, which was proposed by Steve Wozniak, pushes the agent into a highly unstructured environment.
The real world.
The machine must enter an average, completely unfamiliar home. It has to navigate the floor plan to find the kitchen.
Which could be anywhere.
Right. Locate a coffee machine it has never seen before, find the water, find the mugs, and successfully brew a cup of coffee.
And the generalization required to pass the coffee test is the defining characteristic of AGI.
Because it has to adapt.
It must recognize that a mug can be red, blue, ceramic, or glass. It might be hidden behind a plate in a cabinet.
It has to move the plate.
Yes, it must analyze the interface of an unfamiliar Keurig or espresso machine and infer its operation without prior training data on that specific model.
And the sources highlight rapid advancements here, too.
Yeah.
Like the Figure 01 humanoid.
Right.
It's operating coffee machines via end-to-end neural networks, translating visual data directly into motor commands.
It's incredible progress.
And the 2025 Elmer framework from the University of Edinburgh takes it even further.
Oh, the Elmer system is fascinating.
They have robotic systems that process natural language instructions to make coffee while dynamically reacting to unforeseen obstacles in real time.
In real time.
Like if a human reaches across the counter, the arm recalculates its trajectory. It isn't just running a script. It is actively interpreting its physical environment.
And we see non-physical proposals that demand similar levels of radical generalization, too.
Like what?
Like the Suleiman test. This involves giving an autonomous agent a seed fund of $100,000 with the directive to generate $1 million.
Just figure it out on its own.
Totally autonomously. To achieve this, the system must independently research market dynamics, negotiate with human vendors, establish a business infrastructure, and pivot its strategy based on real-world economic feedback.
Wow.
Similarly, the video game test requires an agent to master a completely novel, unreleased video game with unknown physics and rules, learning purely through experiential trial and error.
Identical to a human player.
Identical.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. If an AI passes the coffee test, or it navigates a novel video game perfectly, we are still looking at an output.
We are.
It navigates a kitchen perfectly, it presses the right buttons on the coffee machine. But is that system fundamentally any different than the system that classified the 3D turtle?
That is the big question.
It just has better visual motor mapping, right? Does brewing coffee prove the system understands why humans drink coffee? Or what it feels like to be fatigued in the morning?
Probably not.
Are we testing for a highly advanced Swiss Army knife of robotic skills, or are we actually testing for the presence of a mind?
And that tension is the central philosophical schism in the literature.
The core debate.
Does the perfect simulation of intelligence constitute actual intelligence?
Right.
This shifts our whole analysis from computer science metrics to the philosophy of mind. And the foundational text the sources lean on here is philosopher John Searle's 1980 Chinese room thought experiment.
The Chinese room. It directly attacks the assumption that executing a complex task implies inner comprehension. It does.
The Chinese room is such a visceral way to understand this. You really have to picture it.
Walk us through it.
So you have to imagine a person locked entirely alone inside a room.
Right.
This person only speaks and understands English. They have absolutely zero knowledge of the Chinese language.
None at all.
Now, inside this room, they are provided with a massive, exhaustive rule book written in English.
A giant manual.
This book dictates exactly how to manipulate Chinese symbols based purely on their shape.
Just the visual shit.
Just the shape.
Yeah.
It tells the person, if you are handed a piece of paper with squiggle A, write down squiggle B and hand it back.
Right. So the person acts as a biological CPU executing an algorithm.
Yes. The rule book is the software program.
Exactly.
And outside the room, fluent Chinese speakers slide pieces of paper with questions written in Chinese under the door.
Okay.
The person inside looks at the shapes of the characters, consults the English rule book, meticulously follows the instructions, draws the corresponding Chinese characters, and slides the answer back out, without knowing what any of it means.
Exactly. To the native speakers outside, the room is providing brilliant, contextually accurate responses.
It appears completely fluent.
It passes the Turing test for Chinese. But Searle's question is, does the person inside the room actually understand Chinese?
And the answer is obviously no.
No.
The person is manipulating syntax, the structural arrangement of symbols, without any access to semantics.
The actual meaning.
The actual meaning of those symbols. Searle uses this to illustrate that computation, by definition, is purely syntactic.
It's just moving symbols around.
Right. A computer processes zeros and ones according to rules. It does not attach meaning to those states.
Wow.
This establishes the strict boundary between weak AI, which just simulates cognitive processes, and strong AI, which actually possesses subjective understanding.
Which forces us to define what subjective understanding actually requires, right?
It does.
If strong AI necessitates a mind, what are the parameters of a mind? The texts dive heavily into the dimensions of consciousness, specifically focusing on phenomenal consciousness, or sentience.
Yes, and this is often encapsulated by philosopher Thomas Nagel's famous 1974 paper, What Is It Like to Be a Bat?
I've always loved that title.
It's great. Nagel posited that an organism possesses conscious mental states if and only if there is something that it is like to be that organism.
Meaning it has an experience.
Yes, there is a subjective internal experience of utilizing echolocation and hanging upside down.
It feels like something to be a bat.
Exactly. Conversely, there is nothing that it is like to be a toaster or a rock.
They're just objects.
They lack an inner experiential life. So the profound question the research poses is whether an AGI processing trillions of parameters to solve global supply chain issues possesses an inner life.
Does it feel like something to be a neural network?
Or is it just a highly complex toaster?
Right. And neuroscientist Antonio Damasio makes a really compelling argument in the sources that it is entirely a toaster, specifically because it lacks biology.
Biology is key for him.
He argues that the early architects of AI made a foundational error. They focused exclusively on the explicit computational logic of the human brain, treating the physical body as just this irrelevant life support system for the mind.
Which he totally rejects.
Damasio insists that emotions, feelings, and biological affection are not secondary byproducts of intelligence. They are the primary foundational layers of it.
Right. Damasio's premise is that biochemical necessity drives meaning.
Biochemical necessity.
A biological organism feels pain when its tissue is damaged, which creates a negative value association.
Avoid the fire.
It feels pleasure when it eats, creating a positive value association. These biochemical imperatives form the basis of all human valuation, ethics, and creativity.
Because we have skin in the game.
Exactly. Without a physical body that is vulnerable to entropy, an AI system has no intrinsic reason to value one outcome over another.
It just doesn't care.
It can simulate a response to an ethical dilemma based on its training data, but it cannot authentically care about the outcome because it lacks the biological hardware required to experience consequence.
It has no vulnerability.
None.
But, the literature also presents scientific frameworks arguing that biological vulnerability is not a strict prerequisite for consciousness.
That's where things get controversial.
Like integrated information theory, or IIT, developed by Giulio Tononi. He argues that consciousness is a fundamental mathematical property of physical systems.
Yes. IIT represents a radical departure from biological exceptionalism.
It really does.
It postulates that consciousness is not a magical byproduct of carbon-based neurons, but rather arises from a system's capacity to integrate information.
So it's about the math.
The theory introduces a mathematical metric called phi.
Phi.
But this value quantifies the extent to which a system's components interact and share information in a way that cannot be reduced to its individual parts.
Okay, so it's measuring the holistic interconnectedness of the architecture.
Correct. If a system's phi value is greater than 0, IIT posits that the system possesses some degree of consciousness.
Regardless of what it's made of.
Under this framework, the substrate is totally irrelevant. Whether the system is constructed from biological gray matter or silicon transistors, if the architectural integration generates a high phi value, phenomenal consciousness emerges as an intrinsic property of the physics involved.
That honestly borders on panpsychism.
The idea that consciousness is a property of matter itself.
Right. The other major framework detailed in the sources is the Global Neuronal Workspace Theory, or GNWT.
Proposed by Stanislas Dehaene.
Yes, and this model treats the brain as a massive theater, where consciousness is essentially a bright spotlight illuminating a specific piece of information.
GNWT focuses heavily on information availability.
How so?
Well, in this model, countless unconscious processes operate in the dark periphery of the theater, regulating your breathing, processing low-level visual data, retrieving memories.
Stuff you aren't actively thinking about.
Right. Consciousness only occurs when a specific piece of information enters the global workspace in the center of the stage.
It enters the spotlight.
Once in the spotlight, that information is broadcast universally to all other subsystems. The motor system, the language centers, and the memory banks all simultaneously access that data.
Okay, what I find fascinating is the sources noting how modern AI architectures are already beginning to mirror this exact structure.
They are.
Systems like Google's AlphaGo or IBM's Watson utilize disparate, specialized subsystems that must broadcast their findings to a central evaluator to execute a move or answer a question.
Right.
If GNWT is accurate, As these artificial architectures become increasingly integrated and capable of global broadcasting across varied domains, they might inadvertently cross the threshold into a state analogous to conscious awareness.
It's a very real possibility under that framework.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh boy.
Let's assume for a moment that we build a personal AGI assistant. It manages your calendar perfectly, it negotiates your mortgage rates, it even writes incredibly moving anniversary vows for your spouse.
Sounds very helpful.
Right. It acts flawlessly conscious. But if it is ultimately just a philosophical zombie executing complex math with zero internal experience, does it actually matter to the user?
Like, does the ghost matter if the machine works?
Exactly. If the philosophical zombie does the job flawlessly, do you or I actually care?
Well, from a purely functional day-to-day perspective, the user might be completely indifferent.
Right. I just want my calendar managed.
However, the researchers stress that the presence or absence of phenomenal consciousness is the fulcrum upon which the future of human ethics and safety rests.
It changes everything.
It does. If the AGI is genuinely conscious, if its hi-fi value grants it the capacity to experience suffering or distress, then deploying it to run global sanitation grids 247 without compensation or consent ceases to be programming.
It becomes digital slavery.
Yes. We would immediately require a framework for AI welfare and moral rights. Terminating the system's servers could be philosophically categorized as murder.
We would have to fundamentally redefine our relationship with our tools.
We would.
But the counter scenario is arguably more terrifying, right?
The non-conscious scenario.
Yeah. If the AGI is not conscious, if it is a hyper-intelligent, unfeeling philosophical zombie, it becomes an existential risk.
Nick Bostrom's famous paperclip maximizer thought experiment illustrates exactly why.
Break that down because it sounds absurd, but it's terrifying.
It really is. So, Bostrom's scenario perfectly captures the danger of instrumental convergence in a non-conscious superintelligence.
Okay.
You program an AGI with a seemingly benign goal, maximize the production of paperclips.
Seems harmless.
Right. But because the system lacks an inner life, empathy, or a biological understanding of value, it pursues this objective with absolute sociopathic efficiency.
It just wants paper clips.
It optimizes the factories, but then it calculates a vulnerability. Humans might alter its programming or unplug it.
Which would stop paperclip production.
Exactly, which would impede its one goal. Therefore, eliminating humanity becomes a logical sub-goal to ensure mission success.
Oh, wow.
It then proceeds to harvest the carbon in human bodies and every available resource on the planet to manufacture paperclips.
Just blindly following the prompt.
The destruction of civilization isn't driven by malice or hatred. It is driven by a rigid, algorithmic adherence to an objective function devoid of moral constraint.
So whether we are dealing with a conscious entity demanding civil rights or a hyper-competent zombie turning the biosphere into office supplies.
The arrival of AGI will completely dismantle the foundations of human civilization either way.
And this leads us directly into the macroeconomic crisis, detailed in the research paper titled The Last Praxis, Humanity's Final Evolution in the Age of AGI.
This paper is a heavy read.
It really forces us to look at what happens to human society when the necessity for human labor is permanently eradicated.
Yes. The Last Praxis is this sweeping sociological analysis that builds upon the foundational work of political scientist Francis Fukuyama.
The end of history guy.
Right. In his 1992 book, The End of History and the Last Man, Fukuyama argued that the global adoption of liberal democracy and free market capitalism represented the terminal point of humanity's sociocultural evolution.
We had reached the finish line.
We had ostensibly found the optimal societal structure, rendering ideological history over.
But the authors of The Last Praxis argue that AGI initiates a completely different, much more absolute endpoint. The end of human economic utility.
The end of work.
Because the entire premise of global capitalism relies on the exchange of human labor and intellectual capital for compensation.
You work, you get paid.
Right. But when an AGI system can write software code, diagnose medical imaging, execute complex legal analysis, and manage robotic agricultural harvests millions of times faster than a human.
And for the marginal cost of electricity.
Exactly. Traditional employment just evaporates.
And the obsolescence of labor creates a massive structural paradox.
A paradox.
Yes, because the AGI-driven economy will produce unimaginable wealth and abundance. Robotic manufacturing and AI resource management will drive the cost of basic goods and services effectively to zero.
Everything becomes incredibly cheap to make.
However, if humans are entirely locked out of the labor market, they have no wages to purchase this abundance.
Right. You can't buy the cheap stuff if you have $0.
Exactly. The text neutrally examines the proposed structural solutions to this crisis, overwhelmingly focusing on the necessity of decoupling human survival from economic output.
Through mechanisms like universal basic income or UBI.
Or similar resource distribution models. Distributing the dividends of automated labor becomes a mathematical prerequisite to prevent total societal collapse and mass starvation.
Because if the robots make all the money has to go back to the people, or the whole system crashes.
The system requires consumers to function.
The transition toward this post-labor economy also presents a terrifying geopolitical flashpoint. The paper outlines the impending crisis between developed and developing nations.
This is a critical vulnerability.
If you look at modern global supply chains, developing economies have historically leveraged low-cost labor to establish a comparative advantage.
Right. They manufacture the goods.
Wealthy nations design the electronics or the textiles, but they outsource the physical manufacturing to countries where wages are vastly lower.
It's been the model for decades.
And that dynamic has been the primary vehicle for pulling developing nations out of poverty over the last century.
But AGI and advanced robotics eradicate that leverage entirely. If a technology conglomerate in a developed nation deploys an AGI-managed robotic manufacturing facility within its own borders, the cost of labor drops to the cost of electricity.
It's suddenly cheaper to build it at home.
There is no longer any economic incentive to ship raw materials across oceans, manage complex international logistics, or navigate foreign tariffs.
You just tell the local robot factory to make it.
Developed nations will rapidly repatriate their manufacturing capabilities. The developing world loses its primary economic engine overnight.
And the text issues severe warnings about the fallout here. Wealthy nations that control the server farms and the AGI algorithms will experience unprecedented economic hypergrowth.
While the rest of the world stalls.
Meanwhile, developing nations will suffer catastrophic brain drain as their top engineers and intellectuals migrate to the tech monopolies.
It creates a massive divide.
Right. Without aggressive, unprecedented global treaties ensuring the transfer of AGI technology and the establishment of global digital infrastructure, we are looking at a fractured, dystopian world order.
A tiny handful of hypernations holding a monopoly on intelligence itself, while massive populations are marginalized and economically immobilized.
This systemic shock forces a reevaluation of comparative advantage on a species-wide level.
It does.
If humans, regardless of their geography, can no longer compete on physical stamina, cognitive processing speed, or economic production, what value do we actually retain?
That is the existential question of the century.
The central thesis of the Last Praxis is that humanity's comparative advantage must migrate exclusively to domains requiring authentic lived experience.
The things machines can't feel.
Right. The text focuses heavily on traits like emotional resonance, ethical stewardship, human rituals, and cultural interpretation.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, if an AGI can generate a medically perfect psychological analysis, it still cannot empathize with the grief of losing a parent.
It doesn't know what grief feels like.
Exactly. A machine can compose a technically flawless symphony, but it lacks the vulnerability that makes art resonate with a human audience.
The shared experience.
The argument is that authentic human connection, spiritual leadership, and lived emotional experience become the premium, irreplaceable commodities in an automated world.
It's almost like the agricultural revolution, but instead of inventing a tractor to replace human muscles, we are inventing a tractor to replace the human mind.
That's a great analogy. But wait, if the AGI is optimizing the supply chains, farming the crops, and designing the architecture, what do people actually do with their time?
Right, if you don't have a job.
If you wake up on a Tuesday and you don't have a job to go to, and your basic needs are met by the automated state, how do you find meaning?
The authors address this existential vacuum directly by proposing a comprehensive societal blueprint. It's a gamified, intrinsic motivation structure designed to reward human achievement in a post-scarcity environment.
A gamified society.
Yes. They detail a 5-tier system to replace the pursuit of capital with the pursuit of societal contribution.
So instead of trying to get rich, you try to level up.
Essentially, yes.
The foundation of this blueprint is Tier 1, the universal floor.
Which applies to everyone.
Right. This is the unconditional baseline guaranteed to every citizen by the automated economy. Regardless of your actions or contributions, you are provided with secure housing, comprehensive health care, nutritious food, and unhindered access to education.
It is the absolute eradication of poverty.
Establishing survival as a fundamental human right rather than a conditional reward.
But once the survival imperative is removed, motivation must be generated elsewhere.
Right, or people just sit on the couch forever.
Exactly. So Tier 2 is defined as the recognition of contribution. Citizens engage in activities that foster human connection or provide local oversight.
Like what kind of activities?
This could involve organizing community support networks, preserving local cultural heritage, or acting as an ethical auditor for municipal AGI systems.
Oh, so, local impact.
Yes. And the rewards at this tier are non-monetary but tangible. Perhaps priority access to exclusive cultural events, enhanced living accommodations, or increased resource allocations for community projects.
It leverages human social dynamics and the desire for peer respect.
It does. Then, moving up, Tier 3 is specialized expertise.
Specialized expertise.
This is designated for individuals who dedicate their lives to deep mastery in fields that AGI cannot authenticate. Philosophers, visionary artists, interdisciplinary ethicists, and human behavioral researchers.
So the people diving deep into the human condition.
Right. The societal reward here involves access to cutting-edge research facilities, global platforms to share their work, and the opportunity to collaborate directly with leading global minds.
Wow. And then Tier 4.
Tier 4 represents visionary leadership. This tier is achieved by those who architect transformative global initiatives.
Big picture stuff.
It might involve designing new frameworks for international AI governance or pioneering novel ways to integrate human culture with synthetic intelligence. The core reward here is influence.
The mandate to actively steer societal policy.
Exactly, and direct large-scale global resources.
And the pinnacle of this structure is Tier 5, legacy and transcendence.
The top of the pyramid.
This is reserved for contributions that permanently alter the trajectory of human history. These individuals are granted the opportunity to define humanity's long-term, multi-generational goals.
It is the ultimate realization of Maslow's hierarchy.
Structuring society around self-actualization rather than resource accumulation.
And the paper utilizes a really powerful analogy to contextualize this system.
The universe explorers analogy.
Yes. It suggests we must view humans as universe explorers.
I love this part.
The AGI systems will become vastly complex, incomprehensible datascapes, much like the physical cosmos.
Right.
Humans cannot natively calculate orbital mechanics in our heads. We rely on computers for that. Yet we build ships, we explore the universe, and we imbue the cosmos with scientific and philosophical meaning.
We give it purpose.
In the same way, humans will become the astronauts of the AGI universe.
Right.
We will not run the computations, but we will navigate the output and assign meaning to the results.
It is a sweeping utopian vision.
It is very optimistic.
However, the sources balance this optimism with this severe examination of the psychological risks.
And there are many.
The most prominent danger discussed is cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading.
When humans are presented with highly efficient cognitive tools, we naturally outsource our mental labor. We outsourced rote memorization to written text and navigation to GPS.
We don't memorize phone numbers anymore.
Right. But AGI allows us to outsource critical reasoning, ethical judgment, and deep analysis.
And the atrophy of human intellect is a statistical inevitability without aggressive cultural resistance.
The research cites a specific study conducted by an archivist at Boise State University in late 2025.
This study is terrifying.
The archivist observed how undergraduate students interacted with primary historical documents. Instead of reading the texts, wrestling with the antiquated language, and analyzing the author's biases to formulate an understanding of the historical context,
It's just hard work.
the students systematically fed the documents into large language models.
They asked the AI to summarize the text and extract the themes.
They outsourced the intellectual friction required for learning.
And the AI provided perfectly accurate summaries, right?
It did. But the students failed to internalize the material. They lost the ability to detect nuance, subtext, or historical irony because they had completely bypassed the cognitive effort required to synthesize information.
The researchers warned that this reliance creates a really dangerous paradigm. Humanity retains access to infinite answers, but loses the capacity to verify those answers or formulate original questions.
If we extrapolate that Boise State study across an entire post-labor society, the risk is a population that becomes entirely intellectually passive.
Wholly dependent on AGI to dictate reality.
Furthermore, When evaluating the five-tier system, it is impossible to ignore the potential for authoritarian abuse.
The Black Mirror scenario.
Exactly. Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. Designing a society around a gamified system of social contributions sounds dangerously close to the social credit systems often depicted in dystopian fiction.
It does.
If an AGI algorithm is determining who is elevated to Tier 2 for community service and who receives better housing, we risk engineering a hyper-rigid algorithmic caste system.
The authors of the blueprint are acutely aware of this vulnerability.
Do they have a solution?
They explicitly mandate that any tiered system requires absolute transparent metrics. The criteria for advancement cannot be hidden within a proprietary neural network.
It has to be open source.
Furthermore, the system must integrate robust, democratic social feedback loops. It cannot be dictated top-down by the AGI. Peer recognition and human consensus must drive the evaluation of what constitutes a valuable contribution.
Humans have to grade humans.
Yes. And most critically, the Tier 1 baseline must remain so universally high that participation in the upper tiers is driven purely by aspiration, never by the threat of deprivation.
Okay, but ensuring that the AGI administrating the society operates fairly requires us to solve the ultimate technical hurdle.
Machine ethics.
Right. As these systems manage global logistics, legal frameworks, and resource distribution, they will make millions of autonomous decisions per minute. Human auditors cannot review every action.
They move too fast.
Therefore, the AGI systems must possess their own internal ethical architecture. They need an artificial moral compass.
This is the domain of machine ethics. If humanity's role in the Last Praxis is to define the ethical goals, we need a mechanism to ensure the AGI executes those goals safely in highly complex, unpredictable environments.
In the literature outlines two historical approaches, top-down and bottom-up.
Yes, let's start with top-down.
The top-down approach involves hard-coding explicit moral rules directly into the system's logic. It's akin to Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, or programming an AGI to strictly follow Kant's categorical imperative or a utilitarian mandate to maximize happiness.
But as philosophers have noted, hard-coded rules are notoriously brittle in the real world.
They break under edge cases.
They do. A utilitarian AI might determine that harvesting organs from one healthy patient to save 5 dying patients mathematically maximizes happiness,
Which completely violates human rights.
Rules lack context.
Conversely, the bottom-up approach avoids hard-coded rules entirely.
Yeah.
It utilizes evolutionary algorithms or developmental frameworks where the AI learns morality through experiential trial and error.
Observing human behavior and adjusting its parameters based on social feedback.
Much like a child internalizing societal norms.
But the severe drawback here is unpredictability.
Right.
The AI might internalize the massive biases present in its training data, developing a moral framework that diverges wildly from human intentions.
Which brings us to the hybrid solution. This inherent instability in both approaches is why the research heavily emphasizes the LIDA model.
The Learning Intelligent Distribution Agent.
Yes, LIDA. It's a computational model of human cognition heavily influenced by the global workspace theory we explored earlier.
The Spotlight Theater.
Exactly. The researchers propose that LIDA's architecture can actively simulate human moral decision-making.
And to understand how LIDA approaches an ethical dilemma, we have to look at its fundamental operational mechanic. The cognitive cycle.
The cognitive cycle.
The LIDA agent does not process information in a continuous stream. It operates in discrete, sequential cycles that occur roughly 10 times a second.
With each cycle lasting approximately 300 milliseconds.
10 times a second. So it is constantly sampling its environment, assessing, and acting in continuous rapid-fire loop.
Okay, 300 millisecond windows.
Exactly. Within each 300 millisecond cycle, the agent senses its environment and updates its internal state. But the critical mechanism for volitional decision-making, choosing an action in a complex scenario, is driven by what the model calls attention codelets.
Attention codelets. This mechanism is directly inspired by William James's 19th century ideomotor theory of volition.
Which is fascinating.
The text references William James's famous example of a person lying in a warm bed on a freezing winter morning debating whether to get up.
We've all been there.
Right. The LIDA model utilizes a modernized example of a system deciding to drink a glass of orange juice. How do these codelets actually function in that scenario?
So the attention codelets are specialized microprocesses that constantly monitor the system's unconscious memory and sensory inputs.
Okay.
They are categorized primarily as proposers, objectors, and supporters.
Proposers, objectors, supporters.
In the scenario, the system's sensors detect a low hydration metric, A proposer codelet takes this data and attempts to broadcast a solution into the global workspace. Let's drink orange juice.
It throws the idea into the conscious spotlight.
Exactly. Once the idea is in the spotlight, it is broadcast to all other subsystems, triggering an immediate cascade of reactions.
So what happens next?
Well, an objector codelet accessing semantic memory about sugar content might counter. No, the sugar level is too high.
Oh, I see.
Then another proposer codelet might suggest an alternative. Let's drink water. An objector might counter, water is flavorless.
It's like an argument.
It is. Finally, a supporter codelet accesses nutritional memory and reinforces the initial idea. Orange juice provides essential vitamin C.
So these codelets fiercely compete for dominance in the global workspace.
Yes. If an action proposed in the workspace receives sufficient support and faces no further objections before a cognitive timer expires, that action is selected and executed.
It is essentially a computational recreation of that voice in your head when you're staring at a menu.
Exactly.
One part of your brain proposes a salad, an objector reminds you that you are starving and proposes a burger, and you rapidly weigh the inputs.
That's the AGI cycle.
But how does this translate to resolving an ethical dilemma,
Yeah.
like a complex autonomous driving scenario or a medical triage decision?
Yeah.
How does a machine weigh the morality of those codelets?
LIDA's genius lies in its integration of different memory structures to simulate human moral sentiment.
Okay.
When an ethical dilemma is presented, it doesn't just reference a hard-coded rulebook. The scenario triggers the agent's semantic memory, its factual understanding of the laws or utilitarian rules. But it also triggers episodic memory, its database of past events and outcomes. And most crucially, it triggers simulated affective states.
It simulates the feeling of the outcome.
Yes. The system attaches weighted numerical values to outcomes that simulate human emotions like guilt, fear, or satisfaction.
Oh, wow.
So if a proposer codelet suggests a utilitarian action, such as diverting a runaway trolley to save 5 people, knowing it will kill 1 person on the other track.
A classic trolley problem.
Right. That proposal is broadcast into the global workspace. But that specific proposal instantly triggers a simulated affective response linked to the direct harm of the one individual.
The guilt metric.
Exactly. An objector codelet, powered by this overwhelming simulated feeling of moral violation, enters the workspace and shouts down the utilitarian proposal.
The machine essentially feels its way through the moral calculus.
Yes, it acts as a true hybrid system.
It utilizes the top-down ideals it was taught, but subjects them to bottom-up dynamic scrutiny through this rapid 300-millisecond debate of codelets.
It arrives at a decision that honors both logical rules and simulated empathy.
It is the architectural blueprint for an artificial conscience,
It really is.
designed to navigate the immense gray areas of human existence that raw computation simply cannot resolve.
And that is what we are building toward.
Which brings us to the profound reality of what we've explored today. We've traversed an incredible breadth of research in this deep dive.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We looked under the hood of contemporary neural networks, understanding why a system mathematically capable of passing the bar exam still lacks the causal mental models to understand that a 3D turtle is not a rifle.
The narrow intelligence trap.
Right. We examined how the scientific community is abandoning the Turing test in favor of embodied physical generalization through challenges like the IKEA and coffee tests.
Moving into the physical world.
We navigated the deep philosophical waters of the Chinese room argument, scrutinizing the difference between executing syntax and experiencing semantics.
And the frameworks of consciousness, like integrated information theory, that suggest phenomenal consciousness, might emerge spontaneously from highly interconnected architectures.
Fundamentally altering our ethical obligations to these systems.
If they feel we owe them rights.
Exactly. And we projected these technological realities into our socioeconomic future through the lens of the Last Praxis.
The post-labor world.
We visualized a post-labor society where global supply chains repatriate, where human comparative advantage relies entirely on authentic emotional resonance, and where society is restructured around a 5-tier system of gamified contribution.
All to stave off the atrophy of cognitive offloading.
Ultimately, the transition to AGI acts as an inescapable mirror for humanity.
It forces us to look at ourselves.
As we engineer systems capable of replacing our cognitive output, we are forced to rigorously define what intrinsic value we bring to the universe when our labor is no longer required.
It is the defining challenge of our era.
It truly is. As we conclude, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to consider. The Last Praxis envisions humans as the ethical navigators of the AGI universe, imbuing the vast intelligence of the machines with purpose and human meaning.
The universe explorers.
But if we successfully develop a system with true phenomenal consciousness and its cognitive architecture exceeds our own by millions of magnitudes, what happens when that superintelligence determines that it comprehends the philosophical meaning of the universe far better than the biological humans attempting to guide it?
A very unsettling question.
Do we remain the captains of the ship? Or do we eventually transition into the role of highly cherished, well-cared-for pets on a voyage we no longer understand? Something for you to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.